Here on Live Now from Fox, we want to get into a major conversation that is happening surrounding remote work and also return to work as well. Fox's Caroline Shively has more on this from Washington.
Do you or don't you prefer working from home? It's a debate that's got the country torn. Some like the flexibility. Others think face-to-face interaction is best.
Companies would love to have people back in the office 5 days a week, but they know that that's going to greatly cut into their ability to attract, retain, and engage the best talent.
But for companies wanting their employees back in the office, good news is a majority of workers who have returned enjoy it and say they are more productive, even if they came back begrudgingly.
You need to be in the office. You need that FaceTime. It's how humans interact. I mean, on the screen is not exactly the same.
Amazon is reportedly penalizing workers if they don't show up enough. Goldman Sachs wants their staff in 5 days a week. Apple, Starbucks, and Disney are also cracking down on attendance. Even the White House says enough is enough. The president is asking his cabinet officials to urge federal workers to return to the office this fall, a plea that so far has been ignored. And then there's Zoom, the company that made working from home possible. They want their employees back at least a few days a week if they live close enough.
They're landing in the place that I think most companies are going to land, which is some combination.
According to Bankrate, 2 and 3 full-time workers support hybrid schedules, but employees are still trying to figure out what their new norm will look like.
We're going to have a lot of trial and error through this process because we are shifting from the old workplace to the new workplace.
Some rural areas, meanwhile, are fully embracing remote work, trying to attract people with cash and free gym memberships. In Washington, Caroline Shively, Fox News.
Caroline, thanks so much. Let's bring to the conversation now Michael Romer. We're going to talk about this extensively. He joins me now. Michael, thanks so much for being with us. So, this is really persisting, and I don't think these companies and I don't think these workers are going to go down without a fight, though. But you are seeing right now, at least, the hybrid model seems to be the preferred model, but still the fully remote kind of holdouts are making their voices heard as well, aren't they?
Well, first of all, Andrew, thank you for having me. I'm happy to join you tonight to talk about this interesting yet political topic. I'm a real estate lawyer based here in Midtown New York City, and if I'm not a proponent of real estate and employees returning back to the workforce, who will be? And it's a really interesting debate. One thing that happened during the pandemic is that employees suddenly became the arbiters as to where they are more efficient and where they are more efficient in terms of how they work. And it's a really interesting debate. And we're still struggling with it now, 3.5 years later, where it's impacting everything. Here in Midtown Manhattan, you're looking at maybe 40 to 50% of the workforce reporting back to the office. And that has real trickle-up problems, as I like to describe it, because it impacts how much rent the landlord receives, which then impacts their ability to pay mortgages, which ultimately impacts the entire commercial real estate market. So it's a bigger problem than the remote employee working from their home really recognizes.
Yeah, something that I've noticed is that the employer now is making these, demands of their employees saying, you got to be here this much, you're going to be penalized if you're not. And so do you think we're going to be seeing with specific companies kind of these brewing legal battles on this topic specifically? Because I just want to cite this statistic. This is from a report from Resume Builder. They say that a whopping 90% of companies plan to implement return to office policies by the end of next year. So this seems to be going by the wayside.
It's a really tricky question for an employer. I'm an employer. Maybe we have 40 some odd employees here in Midtown. We struggle with this. We've had a hard time coming up with a policy. Many of the big banks have been trying. Goldman Sachs recently announced that they would like their workforce back 5 days a week. Others are saying 3 days. Others are saying 2. Others are coming up with a hybrid model, which seems to be the happy medium where employers are saying, okay, we can let our employees have some remote time on a hybrid schedule. But I'll be honest, it really depends on the type of work that the company is doing. I mean, we're a real estate law firm, a lot of papers moving around. There's a lot of collaboration. Nothing beats in office However, we do have some employees that do get remote privileges and certain partners, to be honest. And one thing that we've realized over the pandemic, once you give somebody something, it's really hard to take it away. And I think many employers are struggling with that.
Yeah, you mentioned the commercial real estate market, especially there in New York. I mean, we know, I mean, the data is there. It was so hollowed out because of the pandemic, because, employees were not there. They didn't have to go into the office, and they've stayed at home largely and now have transitioned into a hybrid model. But do you anticipate a rebound there now that some of these employees are literally, being demanded to return to the office? Do you think we're kind of on the up and up with that issue?
I can honestly say I've been coming into the city since the summer of 2020 here in New York, so I can speak for New York City. It's certainly better. I would say we're probably around 40 to 50% of pre-COVID levels, but that is absolutely not enough for the New York City economy to thrive, because the real estate market, employees returning to work, that's what really drives the economy. Just on our street alone here in Midtown, in the last 6 months, a coffee shop closed, a sandwich shop closed. And it's a real problem because it's impacting the smaller retail shops that really rely on the workforce. And you can't sell virtual coffee and bagels. You really can't.
No, that's such a good point. And I want to talk about the productivity issue. I have my own opinions on this. When I had to be, remote there in New York City in the very early days of the pandemic, my thoughts are that, I didn't feel as productive as I would have been in the workplace, in the newsroom, what have you. But we don't really have hard data on this. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, U.S. employee productivity rose by 4.4% in 2020 and 2.2% the following year. And then in 2023, labor productivity rose 3.7% during the second quarter, and it's expected to go up in the next quarter as well. So, I don't want to definitively say you are productive more in the workplace rather than at home, but that's kind of the feeling. At least that's what the CEOs are telling their employees, right?
Well, it's hard because CEOs also don't want to lose their employees too. They don't want to take these privileges away. And employees have grown accustomed to these privileges that resulted from the pandemic. And you have to look at it and say, what's the core of this? And to some extent, complacency and laziness, if I dare say, are behind it, because some employees are looking at it and saying, well, why should I have to commute into the city if I don't have to? Why can't I work from home? And the interesting thing is, pre-pandemic, what employee would have the guts to ask their employer that question? When did the leverage shift to the employee? Now, the leverage has certainly shifted. The pendulum has swung back the other way to an extent. But we have to really find that middle ground, because as much as we need the workforce back, we also need the workforce. And we don't want to lose them because of another employer giving more remote opportunities. But you talked about that valuation issue. I just want to drive this point home. By some accounts, in major cities here in the U.S., you're looking at an $800 billion to $1.3 trillion loss in commercial real estate value due to the remote work phenomena. And that's a huge crisis, not only for the commercial real estate market, but the banks who lend on these huge office buildings, not only in New York, but markets like San Francisco. And in these two markets, you're looking at a drop in demand for office space by some accounts in the area of 20%. Yeah. And we've seen it in San Francisco, where some landlords are just giving the keys back to the bank. And that's certainly not good for anyone.
Yeah. And to your point, though, lastly, it is a domino effect. If the workers aren't there, then these like micro economies, on the street corners there, in the, street blocks and what have you, are also impacted by this. And it really, as we've seen, hollows out a once vibrant downtown. So we'll just have to keep an eye on this. Michael Romer, we do appreciate your insight and expertise. We'll definitely be talking again. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me, Andrew.
All right, back out live there to New York City. Hope you enjoyed that conversation. I think a lot of people are still talking about this, even though we're, 3.5 years on from the pandemic, about the return to work, the remote work, the hybrid work conversation. I bet a lot of you who are watching right now experience that or know some people who experience that in their everyday work life. In the meantime, let's take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're remembering an incredible Latin American artist who passed away today. More on that in 2.